Hello and welcome to another edition of Wes's How-Tos. What we're going to do today is an installation of Windows Server 2008. One of the things that I get asked by far the most from a lot of my students, especially in my sophomore level classes, is, hey Wes, I'd really like to do some of this at home so I can practice. So I can try a few of these things, maybe before test time and really ensure I know what I'm doing. Sometimes it's hard to get into labs, sometimes lab hours are closed, things like that. And so it's really pretty understandable that a student would want to attempt to do a lot of the lab exercises and a lot of the tasks that are required for my courses at home. And I completely understand that thought. And so one of the problems that we had years ago was that you pretty much had to have another set of hardware laying around that you could install things on. And a lot of my kids are geeks at heart and have what they need at home, but not everybody. And so with the advent of today's newer technology, almost anybody has the ability and leftover power on their own desktop or even laptop to be able to perform some of these tasks through a technology called virtualization. And I know most of you have heard of that before. And essentially what virtualization is allowing us to do is use one current running subset of hardware, and what we're going to do is desktop-based virtualization. So what it does is it essentially is a program that allows us to virtualize or create duplicate virtual instances of all our hardware. And what that allows us to do is through a program like VMware Fusion, Parallels for Mac OS, Workstation of course is the VMware equivalent on a Microsoft PC, also open source solutions that are fantastic like VirtualBox. What they allow us to do is create virtual instances of all our hardware like I just mentioned, and essentially allow us to run a new separate operating system inside of our current operating system. It can be a confusing concept initially, but that's kind of the 10,000 foot view of it. It obviously is far more technical than that. But let's go ahead and get started. I think the best way to go ahead and do this is simply just to get started. And so what you can see right here is I have a image currently of Windows Server 2008. This is an ISO edition, and it is looks like if you look here, it's Windows Server 2008 R2, so we're going to go ahead and install R2. We've got, as far as the additions of Windows Server 2008 in this ISO, packed in are Standard, Enterprise, Data Center, and Web Edition. All of them come with Service Pack 1, and this is a volume license build. It's x64, which means this is a 64-bit kernel. It is a DVD release, so we could copy this to DVD if we wanted to. Now, just for anyone watching, if this is coming from where I'm teaching at Murray State, you're going to have access to this as a student in my classes. Now, if not, you'll need to purchase your own version of Windows Server 2008 or simply download a trial version. So when you begin your install, what you see initially may be slightly different than what I've got here. But don't let that bother you. We're just going to do a basic, well, for lack of better words, a vanilla install of Windows Server 2008. We're going to go with the Standard Edition. But I did want to outline to you the way that this ISO has been labeled so we can quickly and easily understand what's inside of it, what it is, what edition, what kernel release, and so forth. So let's go ahead and get started. My virtualization software of choice today is going to be VMware Fusion. I tend to like it quite a bit on Mac OS. But obviously I've used as well VirtualBox quite a bit as well, and really like that tool set a lot. It's a great virtualization platform. You can download it for free. Just Google VirtualBox, it'll come right up. Made by Sun, and it is an outstanding virtualization system. Now about VMware, this is of course made by VMware. They're kind of the industry standard in virtualization software, both on the enterprise and even at home and home use as well. So you can see right here I already have two VMs installed. I've got a Windows 8 64-bit, and I've got CentOS that you may have heard of, which is the Linux edition. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to install Windows Server 2008. Assuming I have the memory. I haven't checked before, so we're going to find out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit Add. Now let me say this. For those of you that may have a Windows-based desktop, some of this is obviously going to be different. You're not going to be using VMware Fusion. You'll probably use VMware Workstation or possibly VirtualBox. Either way is going to be no problem. But what we're going to do today is Fusion. So if you're on a PC, some of these steps initially are going to be slightly different, but I don't think you'll have any trouble finding out how to get to the point where we begin the install. So you may have to do a little bit of homework to get to that point. Okay, so let's begin. If you see down here, we do have about 50 gigs free of hard disk space, so we should be good to go. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's actually set for CentOS, and then we've got 10 megs specified for Windows 8. Don't know what's going on there. Anyways, so let's go ahead and hit add. And what we're going to do, we have some options here. We can import, we can migrate from, another PC or from our boot camp partition, which can be very, very cool. But in our case, we're just going to select new. So go ahead and do that. And now at this point it's saying, okay, we can do this. How do you want me to go about this? Obviously, since I'm using one of the brand new MacBooks with Retina, the mighty Apple has decided that DVD drives are, no longer essential. So whether you want to agree with that or not is beyond the scope of this video introduction. However, we don't have a DVD player. So this is why I have an ISO pre-downloaded and ready to go for us. But if you do have a disk rather than an ISO, that's no problem. My guess is that your software will automatically recognize that you have a DVD in, and probably even see that it's ready to go as a Windows image. So some of you may have that from your textbook, which includes a trial 180-day version of Windows 2008. And if that's the case, it'll probably just work right away. Okay, so what we're going to do is tell Fusion, hey, this is no problem. We don't have a disk in. We're going to specify an ISO later, so we're just going to say continue without disk. Okay. Now at this point we've got a couple different options. We can specify a disk or an image, and remember this ISO, I haven't mentioned this, but ISO essentially means this is a disk image. Okay, so we can use this, and this is the option we're going to choose. However, there are some other options as well. We could add to an existing disk. Now this is not relevant for us for what we're doing today, so I'm going to skip by this. Or we could create a new custom virtual machine, custom. And again, what we're going to do today, we're not going to discuss the other two options at this point. We may have another video series on this, but for us today, we're going to go ahead and use our first option. So obviously, what we need to do is choose which image we're going to go with. So I'm going to select it, and I'm going to say where it is. So as we know, it's here on my desktop, and here we go, and we're going to simply hit open here, and here we are. We're ready to go. So in this case, we have English server, Windows 2008, so on and so forth. See the big long name, and it does match up to what's here on my desktop, so we're good to go. So let's go ahead and hit continue. Now notice that it is smart enough to look at either the file name or the data inside, and it recognizes that it's Windows, and it's Windows Server 2008 R2 64-bit edition, which is exactly what we need. Now what this is important for is simply some of the initial install steps, but you don't necessarily have to have this pitch perfect. Do notice that we do have some other options here depending on what it is, so just be aware of this. But if you're using something just off FreeBSD or something like that and don't see it, don't panic. You should be still okay on an install. Okay, notice that we do have some other options here in case it read the disk incorrectly, but for us it was correct. So we're going to go ahead and keep that as our default option too. So if yours is not correct, you may need to set that as you need. Okay, now at this point we have some options. The easy install is nice because it takes away some of the initial options that just saves us some time. Kind of start it, walk away, come back, and does some things easier for you. However, we're not going to go that route. We're not going to use the easy install. We want to kind of go through custom and make sure everything is selected exactly the way that we want it. Also, I'm not obviously going to enter in a product key on this video, which makes obvious sense. So let's go ahead and hit continue. Now at this point it's basically saying, okay, listen, here's how we're going to do this. We are going to install Windows Server 2008, and we're going to allocate 2 gigs of memory. Now for us, for what we're doing as a video introduction, that is sufficient. You do need to be aware of how much memory your computer currently has. This machine, I believe, is running, let's say 8 gigs, I think. So 2 gigs should be more than sufficient, not only to run the operating system, but also not to tie down the resources on my machine as well. And so, if you're running a machine with, a host desktop with 4 gigs of memory, you might want to bump this down to 1 gig. If you're running 16 gigs, and you might have the ability and availability to go from, instead of 2 gigs, maybe assign 4 gigs to it. But it also depends on how you're going to be using this operating system. Keep in mind, for this video, we're just simply installing Windows Server 2008, and in the future, if I use this image for further demonstrations, I'm not going to really tax this machine out. So to me, 2 gigs is enough. Really, same rule of thought, same logic goes with disk size. 40 gigs is enough for me. Now, if you're going to be virtualizing a machine and going to actually be using it in the enterprise, and it's going to become some kind of file server, something like that, it may need to be quite bigger than 40 gigs. So you need to make that call as well. Again, for me, this works. Now, networking. We've got shared networking, NAT for network address translation. Now, I'm not going to talk about that much in this video because it's not quite important, but I will have some more video series coming out that will detail all the differences between the networking types that we can select. And then notice